Thank you for the click. My name is Luxeley. You guys are going to have to evaluate me and grade me with a curve on this particular first impression video because I have a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of passion, and a lot of excitement for Boomkins right here and now. You might think this guy's OD'd on Red Bulls. This guy went to Starbucks once too much and had a few too many caramel macchiatos. The bottom line, Boomkins across the board in each and every category are very, very good. And I wish they would go live as is right now. But that's probably not going to happen. I'm going to break these categories down into 6. 1, single target damage. 2, AOE damage. 3, crowd control. 4, survivability. 5, mobility, and the last category, utility. Now, as I throw that word out there, a lot of people have different ideas of what the definition of utility is. Let me talk about what I'm talking about when I talk about utility. It's not about the single target damage you bring or the AOE damage you bring, in a lot of cases even the CC you bring. It's about what is it that makes a group, whether it's an RBG group or a Mythic Dungeon group, what is it that makes them say, we got to get ourselves a Boomkin? That's what I mean when I talk about utility. What is it that Boomkins are bringing that will benefit an overall group that most other classes are not bringing to the table? Now, when I grade each and every category, I'm going to grade it on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 meaning most likely need a buff. That's not going to happen when we're talking Boomkins. 5 meaning most likely going to get a nerf. And you can kind of figure out what's in the middle. 3, obviously, middle of the road, average. Now, I'm heavily weighing 2 factors into each grade. 1, how do Boomkins compare in BFA beta to Boomkins in Legion? Are they better? Are they bringing something different to the table? Heavily going to weigh that in. The other aspect I'm going to probably weigh in a little bit more is how Boomkins compare to other DPS casters and even other melee DPS in each particular category. Because the idea here is you want to be the guy who's in a starting lineup. You don't want to be the guy who's on the bench. And sometimes that does come down to class because let's face it, there are a lot of people that do outstanding single target damage, a lot of people that do tremendous AOE damage. But when you start to bring certain things that your class has that other classes don't have, you have an opportunity to facilitate a unique niche and bring extra value. And that's what I mean by utility. Keep in mind, this is not necessarily a guide. You might see me using some talents that just don't make sense. I'm testing things out. That's the reality of it. And trying to figure out something that works for me and I think would work for other people. So it's not a guide. It's really a first impression video, a review video. And the whole idea, get an idea what it is that's going to be nerfed or buffed or where things stand right here and now. Single target damage. Moonfire and Sunfire will make a return into BFA. Sunfire will do damage to nearby targets. Moonfire will not. However, Moonfire, there's some talk. Saw this on MMO Champion. Consider it a blue post. Talk about a new talent that's going to be introduced, which means either one of the existing talents is going to be reworked or outright gone. This new talent is called Twin Moons, which will do what Sunfire does, essentially, which means when you hit a Moonfire, that damage will spread to nearby targets. So if there's 3 targets in an area and you hit Sunfire on one target, Moonfire on another, all 3 will have both dots. That's pretty damn huge. So we'll see if that comes into fruition. Solar Strike, Lunar Strike are back. Lunar Strike still benefits from Moonkin Frenzy, but for the second X-Pack in a row, there's no toolkit for Moonkin Frenzy. Moonkin Frenzy means that when you take damage, there's a percentage chance that your next Lunar Strike will be instant cast. Also, there's the talent that gives you 3 instant cast Lunar Strikes. That is also coming back in BFA. Huge for PvP because it gives you mobility. Huge for PvE because it adds to your AOE damage, simply because Lunar Strike hits all nearby targets. Star Surge is coming back, but that wonderful animation from Goldrin, which had a chance to proc, is gone, unfortunately. Used to love seeing that. Now, speaking of the artifact, New Moon returns as a talent. And unfortunately, it is replacing Astral Communion, which is outright gone. Astral Communion used to give you a boost of 75 astral power, and it was on a 1.3 minute cooldown. That is now gone and replaced with Full Moon. Also, the cooldown on Full Moon was, I believe in Legion, 15 seconds. In BFA, it's 1 minute, which is kind of strange, but nonetheless, I'm not too upset about it because there have been a lot of trade-offs, and the trade-offs have worked out for Boomkin. We're going to get into a few of those in a few minutes. Now, as far as your passive abilities that you lose, you really don't lose a lot with the artifact when it comes into single target damage. You're going to lose the buff of Wax and Wane, which used to stack up to 5 times. But if we end up getting that new talent, Twin Moons, that's a trade-off I'm willing to make, actually. I think it's a very good trade-off. And the other single target thing or ability or trait that we lose from the artifact is Moon and Stars, which used to give you 3% haste when Incarnation was up, and that used to increase every time you did damage. I believe with a cast ability, it would give you 3% haste. Now that is also gone. But overall, maybe you're thinking this doesn't sound very exciting. I'm really restraining myself. The exciting part's going to come with the AOE stuff, the mobility stuff, the utility stuff, the survivability stuff, and of course, the CC stuff, which is really going to augment your single target damage because you're going to be able to do a hell of a lot more. Now, I'm not as concerned about what we're going to lose as far as passive damage from passive artifact traits, just simply because those can easily be baked into the ability in BFA. It's just really hard to figure out because of the level differences, 110 versus 115 or 120, the overall eye level differences, and of course the stat squish. I kind of need Stephen Hawking to help me out with the math here. It's really, you need like a compass, a pickaxe, and Einstein's brain to figure some of this stuff out. So you really got to go by what you feel and what you're gaining and what you're losing. And overall, this feels really, really good. I want to point out that you're not really losing a lot here. And if anything, you're going to be gaining a lot because you're going to be gaining some crowd control abilities, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. Overall, for single target damage, I got to give a Boomkin a solid 4. I might even give it a 5 because one of the abilities that I'm going to cover that's also going to increase your single target damage is covered in the AOE section. So let's split the difference and call it a 4.5. AOE damage. Right around the middle of Legion, Blizzard stepped up, hit Starfall pretty damn hard with the nerf bat. It was a needed nerf, but the reality is, like most of the time when Blizzard nerfs or buffs something, they tend to overdo it. I'm not going to say that it gimped Boomkins. You still outperformed in AoE damage, but the reality is Starfall was, the best way to put it, no longer on steroids. So Starfall does make a return in BFA, and once again Blizzard smacks it with the nerf bat. What they did essentially is the tier 100 talents, okay? Right now, Nature's Balance pretty much is garbage, okay? You're not going to take it for PvP because you're going to get that extra utility and mobility from Stellar Drift, so you could cast it while moving within the wake of Starfall. Or you might end up taking Fury of Elune, which is a completely, totally retooled and reworked talent. We're going to get to that excitement in a couple of seconds. But as far as Stellar Drift, that got hit with the nerf bat. Still increases your overall Starfall radius by 30%. However, the buff to the damage is 25%, while in Legion it was 50%. So Blizzard continues with their wonderful ways of nerfing Starfall. And you might think, Luxley, why is this good? Why is this exciting? Well, while Blizzard is beating the daylights out of Starfall, they are basically taking all those steroids and injecting it into Fury of Elune. This is a completely different talent than it used to be in Legion. In Legion, Fury of Elune was something that had a positional requirement. In other words, if you hit Fury Elune on a target, that target could just simply move out of the way, and then you have to recast it, and it was very, very aggravating and very, very frustrating. And the reality is, you were just better off taking Stellar Drift, and you were better off using your astral power for something like Star Surge or Starfall. Well, things might have changed here. I haven't crunched out the numbers, but the way this looks, I think a whole new game plan is in effect here. Here's what Fury Elune does in BFA. It calls down a beam of pure celestial energy that follows, keyword, follows the target for 8 seconds, dealing 1,250 astral damage to all enemies every second. Now, it deals a little bit less to the surrounding enemies, but still, that 1,250 translates into having probably about 4 or 5 Sunfires and Moonfires on a target. That's pretty damn huge because you already have Sunfire and Moonfire on the target. And that's for 8 seconds. That is huge. Now, it comes at a huge cost. It's 80 astral power, has a 45-yard range, and a 1.5 minute cooldown. But I'm going to give you a preview of how powerful this can be, because you can take deep roots, which means that your roots can't be broken. So if you hit deep roots on a target, and you hit Fury of Elune, and you decide, let's just throw in a full moon while we're at it, you are not only deleting that target, you are deleting that person's entire account. That's how powerful it could potentially be. Yes, a nerf is most definitely and most probably going to be in line. You have to keep in mind here too that Sunfire does spread to other targets, and if they introduce that new talent, Twin Moons, now you're having Sunfire and Moonfire spread to other targets, Fury of Elune, you're just deleting players. And let's add Stellar Flare into the mix as well. It just got me so excited. On a scale of 1 to 5, this is a 5, and the nerf pat's gonna find this sooner or later. Crowd control. Boomkins have always been a little bit underrated with regard to crowd control or CC. This is more evident on the PvE side of the game. PvEers might be thinking, yeah, you're right, they're not that great when it comes to CC, Mythic Dungeons, etc., etc. The reality is, Cyclone, which used to be a baseline ability, ended up being a PvP talent in Legion, and that's really what diminished a lot of the crowd control that Boomkins had. In PvP, yes, they were able to have Cyclone, so it wasn't quite as evident. You're thinking to yourself, yes, Luxeley, they were still a pretty good CC machine. There were better, there were worse, but overall very underrated. And one of the things that frustrated me, one of the things that frustrated Luxeley was that last tier in the PvP talent tier. That last tier infuriated me because as far as I was concerned, Cyclone needed to be baseline and I needed deep roots, especially towards the end of the X-Pack when people just sort of realized, hey, all I have to do is move out of the way of a full moon or a half moon. I just have to move a little bit to the left, strafe a little bit to the right. It's not going to hit me with its full impact. Wow, yeah, very true. And it was very, very annoying. And for you to sit there and cast an Entangling Roots, what ends up happening, the dots are probably going to break it if the dots are on it, or as soon as it hits, it's going to break it. Or the reality is, even Mass Entanglement, it kind of forces you to take that, which isn't a bad choice, but now you're weaker against melee because you don't have the stun. Typhoon was a joke anyway, but that's no longer true. Gonna get to that in a little bit. So the bottom line here, you really needed to have deep roots in order to root the target because you can't sit there, cast Entangling Roots, hope your dots don't break it, and then cast Full Moon. That's like a week of casting. It's ridiculous. You can't do that. But with deep roots, you were able to root them down and hit them with a full moon, and that was pretty huge. And that meant you couldn't take Cyclone. Well, things have been reworked and changed. So not only can you have deep roots if you want, but you can also have Cyclone, and you could also disarm players with Fairy Swarm. This is pretty damn huge. This is going to make Boomkins probably the greatest caster in PvP, or very, very arguably one of the better casters along with Demolox right now. This has been a huge, huge change. Of course, your baseline abilities, Solar Beam and Entangling Roots are still there, and you have a really good tier in tier 60 to pick your particular poison. You could go with Mass Entanglement, which has a 35-yard range, 30-second cooldown, roots everyone in place, and you can root the targets into a Solar Beam. Incidentally, there's a macro for that. I'll show that when I do a Boomkin guide. Bottom line is it's a one-touch macro because all interrupts are still off of the GCD, so the reality is one-touch, Mass Entanglement, put everybody in a Solar Beam. Solar Beam is very, very unique for Boomkins. It's something no one else has that AoE silence, so you're bringing a lot of value there. But Bash is great against melee. It's a 5-second stun, but it's on a 50-second cooldown, which is a bit long, so that kind of sucks. And let me say something about Typhoon. I used to love this ability. It was a true, genuine type of knockback back in the day. And Legion, for some reason, sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. I guess it all depended on what side of the bed Typhoon woke up on or how they felt at a given moment. But now, as you might be able to see in some of these clips that I've been showing, Typhoon works. and it works pretty damn well. It's still not as powerful as a thunderstorm or an explosive trap, but it's not useless, and it's more reliable. Somehow, some way, Blizzard found a way to fix this. We also have a few other additions, which I guess you could put in the utility section, but I'm going to put here. You have Soothe coming back with basically soothes the target, dispelling all enrage effects. This is only going to affect one class in the game, Fury Warriors. I haven't played a Fury Warrior. I don't know if we're going to see a lot of them, but the bottom line is it will have a pretty decent effect in PvE in Mythic Dungeons. Otherwise, I don't think they would have brought it back. And we also have something called Hibernate, which is a 1.3 second cast, 35-yard range, no cooldown. Basically, you put beasts and dragons to sleep. This is going to be pretty big against BM hunters. You're also going to be able to use this in various dungeons. Just make sure you don't have any dots on the target. So the CC here, greatly improved. I have to give it a solid 4, maybe even a 4.5. You're not going to always be taking Cyclone, Deep Roots, and Fairy Swarm, but you do have that option to take all those 3, and that's going to basically put fits into melee. I give it a solid 4.5 here. Survivability. No matter what, there's always bear form. No matter how much Blizzard tries to nerf this ability, and believe me, they sure do try, it's still there. Nuclear bombs can't take it out. It is still always there. Now, the downside of bear form is you cannot maintain offensive pressure as aggressively as you're able to because you're in bear form and the only dot you could use is Moonfire. But the reality is the way Fury of Elune has been reworked, you get 2 dots on the target, Moonfire, Sunfire, and if you even go with Stellar Flare, go bear form, your dots are doing their work while you're doing your work to protect yourself in bear form. Not a bad plan. Or you can easily go with Arresto Infinity, which is going to give you 3 core healing abilities, Wild Growth, Rejuve, and Swift Mend. You're going to have to basically find a good spot for you to heal, to get away from the fireworks, to get away from the dangerous melee players behind a pillar, a nice little niche somewhere in the battleground, which you can do because you do have good mobility still. So it's all a question of what you're most comfortable with. Both of them are very good. I think you can maintain a little bit more offensive pressure with Arresto Infinity, but bear form is always there and it can easily be trusted. Of course, Barkskin does make a comeback. 1 minute cooldown reduces all damage by 20% and basically prevents damage from delaying your spellcast for 12 seconds. It's a decent defensive ability. I can think of better ones in the game that I'd rather have that other classes have, but nonetheless, it's nice to have it. It is there. And of course, you have your Trusted Regrowth, which seems to be healing a little bit more than it did in the Legion. It's a fair heal, and it's a fair cost for a hybrid. Overall, whether you go with a Resto Affinity or a Guardian Affinity, your survivability is a solid 3. I can't say it's a 2. I can't say it's a 4. That means it's gotta be a solid 3. It's not great, it's not bad, but one thing that does add to your survivability, and I said this many times, if you have really good CC, which Boomkins will have in PvP, and if you have very good mobility, which Boomkins do have, your survivability is gonna go upwards. But without including that, I gotta give it a baseline of a 3. Mobility. Druids have been known for their mobility for a very long time. Regardless of what specialization you're playing, Druid mobility is at the top of the charts. But maybe not. Monks came in Mists of Pandaria, Demon Hunters came in Legion. They probably have a little bit better mobility than, say, a Balanced Druid does, or even a Feral Druid or Resto Druid, but the reality is, Druids still have very good mobility. You still have shape-shifting that is going to remove roots and snares. That is absolutely huge. And you can pop into travel form, you could pop into cat form, etc., etc. You might even want to consider taking a feral affinity, which is going to increase your overall speed by 15%, and that is pretty huge. So you can't really knock Druid mobility. You still have Dash, which is on a 2-minute cooldown, gives you a 60-second speed boost for 10 seconds. That's pretty huge. You can take a talent called Tiger Dash, which is new, and it replaces Displacer Beast, more on that in a few seconds. But Tiger Dash basically gives you a 45-second cooldown, and it increases your movement speed by 200%. But it gradually fades over 4 seconds. So Tiger Dash is pretty damn fast, ludicrous speed fast, but like I said, Displacer Beast is no longer there. It is gone. This is not necessarily a casualty of pruning, more so a casualty of embracing the class fantasy. Blizzard decided Displacer Beast does not fit into the class fantasy. And the reality is, so what? So what? Use Wild Charge anyway. It's on a 15-second cooldown, which is shorter than Displacement Beast, and it gives you a lot of flexibility. You can charge in bear form, you can leap behind enemies in cat form, go backwards in Moonkin form, travel form, you gotta leap forward by 20 yards. Even aquatic form increases your speed 150% by 5 seconds. But here's the thing, and there's a macro for this, and a lot of people aren't aware of this, and when I do make the guide, I want to make sure this macro still works with all the GCD changes, etc., etc. But there's a two-touch macro that you could use where you mouse over a friendly target, and what you do is you hit Wild Charge. Well, first what it'll do is it'll put you into human form, so it takes you out of Boomkin form, and then you hit it again, and it's a mouse over macro on a friendly target, and it pulls you over, and then you can hit it a third time and go back into Moonkin form. So it's a very, very useful macro. It worked in Legion. There is a little bit of a skill factor involved, so this is something you're going to have to get used to. Displacer Beast had a very, very low learning curve, while working this Wild Charge in many different ways has more of a learning curve. But you get over that learning curve, and you're going to be really, really fluid, and you're going to add a lot of value to groups, particularly in Arena. Overall, even though Displacer Beast is gone, I have to give mobility a solid 4. It's very, very good for Druids, and there's some flexibility as to what you want to go with, that 200% speed boost or go with Wild Charge. It's all a matter of what your playstyle is. I would prefer Wild Charge because it's only on a 15-second cooldown and it gives you a lot of flexibility. Give this a solid 4. Utility. Now, when I talk about utility, I'm not talking about the value you bring to the group. I'm talking about a particular ability that you bring that the majority of other classes can't bring. Something that people are going to say, we want or we need a Boomkin. This is something that Blizzard has been infiltrating back into the game on a very trickle, slow basis. Hopefully they do a little bit faster, but I think even in some of the patches that we're going to see going forward in BFA after launch, we're going to start to see more and more utility added into the game because Blizzard wants to buff up not necessarily the PvP side of the game, but the Mythic Dungeon Invitationals. And utility really has a lot of play there. So far, your overall utility, like I said, I don't think Blizzard would have brought back Soothe if there weren't going to be quite a few different NPCs that you're going to have to get off and enrage. So Soothe would probably have some kind of necessary role in Mythic Dungeons, I think. Not every single one, but a few. Hibernate, same thing, copy and paste. I'm sure that it's there for a reason, and I think that reason is mostly for Mythic Dungeons. Hibernate puts targets to sleep, it only works on beasts and dragonkins. And of course, you have Mass Entanglement. Nobody else kind of has that kind of range Mass Entanglement, except for maybe a mage with his Water Elemental, who I nicknamed Bruce Willis. Don't ask me why. So you have that kind of utility quite a bit with your roots, and you also have a Solar Beam, which is a AOE silence. No other class in the game has that. So your utility is pretty good. I want to point out that one of the more underrated abilities is also Remove Corruption, nullifies corrupting effects on a friendly target, which includes curses and poisons. The way PvP talents are now structured, and this could still change, but you're bringing 3 from an overall pool of anywhere from 12 to 15. And this basically benefits Boomkins probably more than any other class. Number 2 on that list are Warlocks, because the way it works with Warlocks, they could have all 3 of their curses. They could have the curse that takes out some of your health, they could have Curse of Weakness, they could have Curse of Tongues, which means that your Remove Corruption suddenly has a lot more meaning in PvP. Not only to remove curses, but it also has the meaning to remove poisons, which is pretty cool and pretty huge against any given rogue. Well, not any given rogue, but assassination rogues. So removing poisons, removing curses, absolutely huge addition to any given group. I think Blizzard should actually reward players for dispelling and removing any kind of corruption, whether it's a curse, disease, etc., etc. They should reward you with maybe a short-term heal or maybe a boost to some resources, but that's another video for another day. Overall, I would rate a Boomkin's utility, especially if you consider the fact that you're the only class in the game that has an AOE silence in Solar Beam, and you're the one of 2 classes in the game that has a ranged mass entanglement. Overall, I have to give Boomkins a solid 4 for their utility. They bring a lot of value to a group. I'm very, very excited about Boomkins and Demonology Warlocks so far. Those are 2 of my favorites that have been reworked very well. This is Luxeley saying, whatever it is by you, whether it's morning, afternoon, or night, here's a couple of other first impression videos you could take a look at. And I want to say, morning, afternoon, or night, whatever it is, make it epic.